the most startling thing about these indole hallucinogens is the information that we're not talking here about geometric patterns and whirling fizz gigs and stuff like that. We're talking about scenes, songs, strings of imagery, bursts of poetic flight that hover between being felt, seen, and tasted, that go on for minutes on end, as though meaning itself has somehow taken on a self-replicatory life in the visible surface of the mind. And then it's all about, how you come to terms with this. If you have always been a very tight-assed, denying, rational, fearful sort of person, well, then you're just completely appalled, because boundary has dissolved. You don't know whether you're Agnes or Angus. You don't know whether it's up or down. And, it looks to you, it's like the E.B. White cartoon. It looks like megalomania to me, Martha. So, and the old style model was that you're supposed to swing from heaven states to hell states, and that the Tibetans have something to say about this. Well, I don't know. I think it's pretty much up for grabs. It builds in a fugue of images and meaning that finally leave the realm of the sayable, and then it just goes off into what Wittgenstein called the unspeakable. And there, it's the peace that passeth understanding, and all things are made right. But you can't say very much about that when you come down.
Could you comment on your experience with the personality of the mushroom, with the mushroom as an entity?
Oh, yeah. How could I have gotten this far? Yes. I would have been remiss not to mention it, because I think it's the central conundrum, at least for me personally, and I would think for any rational person dealing with these things. We're not just talking about passive agents of transformation and slideshows of alien worlds and stuff like that. The central mystery is that the thing is animate, that there is at the center of these experiences an organized intellecty, an ally, a spirit, an other, and an I-thou relationship is possible. And this is just, now this leads us to the edge of simply wild hyperbole and out into the realm of the utterly improbable. We have no place in our worldview for something like this. I mean, is it an extraterrestrial? Is it Gaia? Is it, as some Jungians have said, merely autonomous fragments of the personality that have slipped from the reins of the ego's control and now return to haunt us as gnomes, kibiri, water spirits, and sylphs of the air? Well, I don't know, but who does know? Yeah. The point not to be lost sight of is that, again, this is real. This is not rare. This is common on psilocybin. What you don't get with, I don't believe anyway, that what you don't get with yoga, what you certainly don't get with mystical experience, is any degree of on-command repeatability of these bizarre mental and physical states. And yet with something like DMT, if you get somebody who is transported into a realm of self-transforming, chattering machine elves, chances are they will get elves every time. Well, imagine the impact of this on the rational mind, that you can be swept into a space where you have to entertain the possibility that, is this a UFO abduction, or am I dead, or am I just simply, God forbid, totally insane now, or what is happening? The animate intellecti at the center of the experience is, I think, the greatest challenge for psychology, for historical assimilation of this phenomenon generally. Because what is it? I mean, our science is trained to allow the slim possibility of extraterrestrials, and so our radio telescopes point to the stars, shifting millions of signals at a time, searching for a radio civilization. But what is it going to do to the forward thrust of historical continuity if right next door in the human mind there is an other, so other that it cannot be assimilated, and yet so accessible that it's only a matter of choice to stand in its awesome presence? I don't have the answer to this question. I think it's amazing that I'm able to articulate the question, because it is against 500 years of expectation and programming that we are finally able to wake up almost as from a fever and say, my God, nature is alive. It's talking to us. It's alive. No, this is not a metaphor. I am not a romantic. This is not an artistic or aesthetic stance. Nature is alive. Someone is on the line. And then, as far as who, I don't rush in to say. I mean, I'm very wary of anyone who claims to know who, because the problem seems to me one of great subtlety and depth. How can we know who is the other until we know who is the self? And perhaps one problem will cast significance on the other.
Speaking of the self, isn't any discipline or spiritual path ultimately the threshold looking into the light of the one who sees? And if one can do that, without physical substances influencing the body, look through that window and experience that luminous beingness, isn't that sufficient without the use of physical substances?
Well, I think that's the challenge that the temporary encounter with this thing sets us. That yes, if we can encounter it temporarily through these shamanic means, then must it not become the historical arrow of our becoming? Must we not then recognize that this numinosum must rise into history as a fact of realizing the eschaton? That's what I think. That actually the shamans are seeing, and have always seen, some kind of transhistorical object, some kind of vast hypostatization of ourselves as deity that is casting a shadow back through time, and that all magic, all religion, all vision is an anticipation of this future state. What excites me is the notion that we may have reached the point in this process where we can consciously know that that is what we are doing, that that is what we are about, that our task is the architectonic expression of the divine other, and then set about it without any more haggling and tail dragging. In other words, to realize what our destiny is will cause us to move toward it with much greater facility and smoothness. This woman at the door.
I have a son who was in a fog for 2 years using dope. What do we say to our children about this?
Well, this is a real problem. I think it goes to the general state of the drug problem, which is, it is one of utter ignorance and victimization. I mean, the government whines and yaps about education, but they're not doing any education. I mean, what do you mean by dope? I mean, they have so linguistically impoverished us that we can't even make a distinction between marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD, what have you. A whole new vocabulary of consequences has to be created. That's what I said earlier. What we don't want is habitual, obsessive, unexamined activity. We don't want it in commerce. We don't want it in drug use. We don't want it in social relations. We don't want unexamined habitual forms of activity that are obsessively expressed. What we do want is conscious, caring, self-examining, inquisitive, thinking people and institutions. So whatever mitigates against that has to be seen as a drug. And things like television, money, propaganda, all of these things then are seen as great evils, which they may not have been seen that way before. We have to get smart. You have to be smart to use drugs. You have to be smart to survive a planetary catastrophe. Now, our ancestors were smart. They got us this far. It wasn't easy. 5 times the ice moved south from the poles. 5 times the human family was islanded and divided by walls of moving ice. It hasn't been easy all the way along. Until 100 years ago, there were no inoculations for infectious diseases. Most women died in childbirth. Many children died in childbirth. The average lifespan, even in Western societies, was 35 years old. So it's going to be tough until we get to heaven. There has to be intelligence. And, one way to be intelligent is to decondition. Our lives are not going to make sense if we tolerate propaganda in our lives. You cannot be half slave and half free. You cannot be half hip and half yup. So the main thing with the drug thing is to get smart, get real smart, fast, or you will lose your children and your mind and your freedom, because all this is at stake. This audience has supposedly a stake in psychology, in transpersonal psychology, which means the destiny and fate of the human mind. So getting smart about the natures and opportunities of chemistry, archaic and modern, should be right at the top of the agenda. We're going to have to end this. Thank you for your tolerance.